Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome to another Anicca webinar. Today, we're going to do a webinar on PPC. We've got Holly with us, who's our head of paid media. We've got a couple of polls that we're going to run, but I believe, Holly, are they part of the actual slides?
They are, yeah. I've embedded them throughout just to keep a little bit of engagement as we go through.
Cool. That's fine. What I'll do is I'll switch my camera off and you can make a start, Holly. Any questions as we go through the webinar, just drop a message in the chat and then we'll collate some questions at the end to go through. So thank you, everyone.
Bro, thank you, Brett. Great, perfect. So yeah, as Brad mentioned, today's webinar is focused around PPC and paid media, and it's looking at how we can do more with less. So a lot of budgets are either being kind of frozen, or companies are looking to make kind of savings here and there, and at the same time, the cost of the ad platforms is increasing with inflation, as is everything. So we're trying to do more with less. We're trying to get more revenue and more leads and sales out of the accounts using either the same or less budget in a lot of scenarios. So this webinar is going to look at what you can focus on to improve the efficiency of the budget that you do have. So starting with kind of what the reality is for a lot of marketing teams, we're seeing a trend in average CPCs. So they are trending up on average by 27%. This does vary per industry. You know, thankfully for some industries, it's remained quite kind of stable, quite static, but other industries are seeing kind of higher rises than this. So for a lot of industries, a lot of businesses, you're seeing kind of strains and you're having to pay more just to get the same back in terms of traffic to your website. That means your website's got to work harder for you, because if you're getting less traffic within the same budget, you need to kind of increase your conversion rates on site. So that's kind of where we start in terms of looking at, okay, how do we get more out of the traffic that we do send to the website? At the same time, research from Gartner indicates that 61% of businesses are experiencing budget cuts. These are going to vary in kind of size and scale, but even if you have a static budget, in real sense, you're essentially experiencing a budget cut because everything cost-wise from the CPCs is going up around you. So even in a static environment, you're essentially experiencing a budget cut. And then what we see from auditing accounts over the kind of the last 12 to 18 months is actually 20 to 30% of account spend, particularly when we're dealing with e-commerce accounts, is inefficient, and there is potential there to kind of save and redistribute that spend into better performing areas. So today is all about finding, you know, where we can make efficiencies to ease the strain on your budgets. We're going to cover why efficiency is the priority. We've started to touch on that a little bit already. How we audit for waste to identify, you know, where can we make those efficiencies. The importance of creative. Creative used to just be this add-on. It was, you know, in a lot of scenarios, particularly in Google Ads, it was a nice to have. It's now becoming, you know, part and parcel of, actually it's something that you need in order to really deliver and get the most out of any account. A big one is attribution and measurement. There's been a lot of changes over the last couple of years that have impacted, you know, what you can measure and the data that you're able to get out of the accounts. So looking at different ways that you can look at kind of the data that is available, and then looking at how automation and AI with an element of control can help you to kind of gain those efficiencies. So I'm going to put our first poll up. I've got it on the slides, but I'll launch it within here as well. Bear with me. So the first poll is asking, what is your biggest paid media challenge right now? So if you're running paid media ads, We've got a couple of options, and then if you select other, just let us know in the comments what it is that you're kind of facing at the moment that's been a bit of a headache for you. So is it budget availability? Is your budget, restricted? Has it been cut? Is attribution and measurement, so knowing what works, is that a big issue for you at the moment? The rising costs, so looking at kind of either on the CPC side, but it also could be other rising costs within your business eating into your margins, that's having a knock-on effect on your marketing. Creative fatigue, so we know a lot of businesses struggle to generate creative frequently and at scale, or if it's other, like I say, just let us know in the comments. Got a mix of answers. By far the most popular is the attribution and measurement, so understanding what is working or not working. There, just give everyone a couple of seconds just to finalize the responses. Yeah, so definitely coming through. Attribution and measurement, knowing what works, is the biggest by far. 53% of you are finding that as your kind of biggest challenge within paid media. 32% is budget availability, and then we've got a few within creative fatigue and rising costs. I will just close that poll. Bro. So in terms of kind of the content today, we are going to go through kind of each of those elements and put a little bit of focus into kind of what we can do around kind of each of those. So why efficiency is the priority right now? So on average, like we say, overall 27% increase in CPCs, but the average CPC rises between kind of industries is sitting, between 10 to 30% on kind of that scale. And businesses, particularly if you're, the marketing manager, there's higher pressure from kind of above, from kind of the board, and how can you kind of get more back from the kind of same budgets. So with budget cuts, how do we get the same, or how do we get more back from kind of a lower budget? When it comes to kind of the efficiency, AI driven bidding is now kind of table stakes. It's not really an option for kind of a lot of accounts, depending on kind of the campaigns. The AI driven bidding, so the smart bidding as it's kind of known within Google, it's going to get you more, and all of kind of the platforms are built around these bidding algorithms. So if you're not using them, then potentially you're missing out, and Google is almost deprioritizing you against some of the other kind of advertisers. So using the bidding strategies is kind of required at this point. We're also seeing, and this comes into kind of the attribution side of things as well, that customers are spending more time within platforms, but also within a kind of a wider variety of platforms as well. So they're not just seeing an ad on Google and immediately purchasing. They're going away, they're going over on to Meta, they might be going on to TikTok, they might be going on to Reddit and doing kind of research. There's a lot more channels and a lot more paths to the point of conversion and securing that custom. So that attribution and that measurement piece has become a lot trickier to kind of pinpoint and hold down. When it comes to auditing for waste, this is all about identifying essentially the budget you don't know that you're kind of seeping. This is all of the kind of inefficient spend that actually, if you took out of that area and put it into kind of your actually top performing elements, then you're going to see more out of your account. So, excuse me, like I mentioned, 20 to 30% of spend when we've kind of audited ad accounts recently has been what we would describe as quietly underperforming. And this might not be, on the surface. So if you look at the campaign level or the account level performance, you might look at that and it might be saying, we're getting a 7-to-1 or 700% return on ad spend. And you might be looking at that and thinking, well, that's great. We're hitting our targets. The account is performing really well. And that, that may be the case. But under that, what we find is there's a lot of hidden spend and a lot of hidden wastage amongst the averages. You might find that, you know, there's a campaign that might have a 400% return on ad spend overall, but actually, if you dive into the campaign and you look at the products within that, if you're doing kind of an e-commerce product campaign, then actually, you know, there might be one product eating 40% of the budget, but it might have a much lower return on ad spend. So it's identifying, you know, where is your spend going at a more granular level, and then looking at how do we redistribute that to get more efficiency. It could also be things like the search term reports. So at a keyword level, again, the keyword itself might seem to perform quite well, but actually that keyword is going to match to a whole host of different searches that a user is putting into Google. Particularly, you know, now we're expanding into kind of AI overviews and AI mode. It's going to trigger different types of searches as well. And then if on top of that you're using the likes of broad match, or you've got dynamic search ads, performance max campaigns running, then it just means that you've got the potential for a lot of wasted spend within kind of the search terms. And if you're not reviewing the search terms on a frequent basis, I would suggest, you know, depending on the data going through your account, you want to be looking at these at a very minimum monthly. But for a lot of accounts, you're going to be wanting to look at them at least when they're in their infancy, or you've set up new keywords and new targeting, looking at them on kind of a weekly basis. So that's about identifying, you know, where is budget being burnt on specific search terms that are again hidden under averages. Other things where we can silently and easily lose efficiency is just leaving old setups as they are and leaving them to run as they did, you know, 2-3 years ago. Something that worked in, you know, 2023, 2024, it could be completely wrong for your audience now. They move between platforms, their behaviors shift, their search trends and their search habits shift. So if you haven't done a structure and a campaign setup audit within the last 12 months, then that's something that you're going to want to have a look at. Does your strategy still align to who your audience is, where they're spending time online, and also their kind of online behaviors as well? Again, that ties back into things like the targeting, things like the settings. So particularly, you know, around like bidding strategies, when you first set a campaign, there's not going to be any data in it. So you might have set kind of a more cautious bidding strategy. You might have set a looser target. You might not have even given it a target if it had no data to start with. But you don't just want to leave things like that. And if you have, it's time to go back and it's time to check what those targets are. Adjusting your bid targets. So for target return on ad spend, for example, that's a quick and easy way to start capping what your average CPCs are and start determining or helping Google to determine which searches it should trigger your ads for. So making sure that, you know, your targets still align with your business needs. If your margins have decreased, it might be that actually, you know, previously where achieving a 400% return on ad spend was fine for your business, actually now, you know, you might need to achieve a 500% just to stay where you were profitability wise 2 years ago. So reviewing kind of these settings, reviewing your targeting, just to make sure, you know, things are still aligned. And if you're not doing that frequently, then, you know, there's going to be wasted spend and there's going to be lost efficiencies within the account. When you're looking at this data as well, and when I go on to kind of the next couple of slides, one of the things to factor in is kind of seasonality trends. So you might look at a product that is not performing now, but it might not be performing because it's kind of out of season. So any adjustments that you make, just make sure that you keep note of these. So for example, if in October last year, you decided that you were going to not bid on barbecues anymore because it's completely out of season, just making sure that actually you're circling back to that when kind of the season relaunches. So for that, it'd have been like March. typically, that you're recircling back to that to make sure that you're not missing out on anything on that front. When it comes to the spend wastage zones in e-commerce, we can typically break them into three areas. So you've got your zero conversion products. So these are products that are receiving spend, but they're not achieving any conversions. Essentially, these products, they're loss making. What I would suggest is when you're looking at zero conversion products, that you're applying spend thresholds, click impression thresholds, just so we're seeing products that actually aren't converting, but actually that they've exceeded what your target would be. So, for example, if you had a target cost per purchase of £10, any product that's spent above £10 and hasn't generated a conversion, this is now a loss-making product. So we can start to look at, okay, how do we tackle that? The first instance might be, do we need to stop spend on that product? Is it consistently underperforming? Have we done everything that we can do to try and give it a better chance? In terms of identifying why it's not performing, looking at things like, are you competitive on price? If you're not competitive on price and you've got no room to maneuver on your price, then it's probably not a product worth pursuing via Google Ads, because it's never going to be, a high performing product for you whilst you're not competitive on price. It could be other things like your checkout process. It could be things on your product page. So looking at kind of that full conversion funnel, what can you do to kind of optimize that? And then, like I mentioned previously, assessing for seasonality. So if you're looking at a product over a 3-month period, that may tell a very different story to the product 3 months ago. So just taking that into consideration. You've also got your low return on ad spend outliers. And these are products that sit below your viable return on ad spend. If you know that as a business, on average, you have to achieve a 400% return on ad spend in order to potentially break even, then anything that sits below 400% is loss making for you. And this one is, they've had sales, but they're just not valuable sales to you. So with this, we can look at how do we adjust the targets that we're setting for the campaign. And one of the best ways to do this is applying performance bucketing. And I've got an example of that later in the slide deck. The performance bucketing will allow you to set a different target for these low performing products, because what you don't want to do is keep them in the same campaign as your high performing products. And by applying a target at that campaign level with everything in it, you're either going to restrict your high performers, or you're going to let your low performers run riot within the campaign, essentially. So splitting them out and applying the performance bucketing is going to help to identify and reduce that kind of inefficient spend, and also allow you to set more aggressive targets. So, for example, if your top performers, they're going to perform well, they convert very well, you're going to set a more lenient target to them than you would your low performers. So if your high performers got a target of 600%, you might set a 700% target for your low performers, for example. And then the final bracket is the high spenders with the low return on ad spend. These products are the biggest issue, or one of the biggest issues within kind of the account. They've got high visibility, they've got high spend, but they've got low return. And again, they're very often blended and hidden within that campaign level data. This again is where performance bucketing can really help. Those aggressive targets, and then also looking at, again, those elements around, are you competitive on price? What have you got in your feed? So if it's getting high traffic, it would indicate that, either the product is saying to the user, I'm exactly what you're looking for, and then they're getting to the website and there's a disconnect between what they was expecting and then what they got when they landed on the website. So there's merit in kind of looking at that kind of checkout process, the product pages, and then also what information is in the feed. are you accurately reflecting in your product titles what the product is, so that the user, when they get to the website, they're not like, oh, hang on, this isn't actually what I was looking for. And that can help you to reduce those kind of invalid and wasted clicks on your products. The quickest way and easiest way to run this analysis is with the use of AI. So tools like Claude, if you give them kind of a prompt, if you export your product data via a CSV, you can give tools like Claude, you can give tools like ChatGPT a prompt which basically says, here's my data. These are the parameters. So what am I looking for in terms of a return on ad spend? So what is my target? What does good look like to me? What does the spend threshold need to be? So, you know, in order for a product to get categorized as kind of inefficient, wasted spend, does it need to spend kind of more than, you know, £5? Does it need to spend more than £10? So setting kind of these threshold, and that's going to be different based on, you know, your product catalog. There's no one size fits all. And then you also, where possible, you want to give a segment by segment the product data, you know, by potentially month to address kind of that seasonality. And you want to do this on kind of a longer period. So you might have products that 1 month don't perform for whatever reason, but actually historically, if you look back, maybe they perform quite well. So having that kind of seasonal data. So typically I usually take about kind of 6 months, but up to 12 months to get kind of that full year of seasonal data, to factor that in to kind of the analysis and output. But the AI, utilizing the tools like Claude, is going to be kind of the quickest way to do that. And then once you've got kind of the analysis and you've got the data visualized, you can then decide, okay, what do I need to do about it? So you're still making the decisions, you're still taking the actions, but the AI is helping you to kind of visualize, you know, what's going on within the data. When it comes to, you know, identifying the inefficient spend at the account level, you've got some kind of settings. So things like your content suitability settings. This is where, if you're using Performance Max, if you're using display video, this is looking at how and where your ads are showing across the web, and how much, you know, how much are they spending? Are they relevant to your business, to your product? If they're not, you can start to take them out. So a lot of the account audits that we do, when we look into kind of the content suitability settings, they have nothing applied. And not only does it, you know, open you up to kind of inefficient spend, it also can potentially damage your brand, because it can have your ads appearing against insensitive content. So they're really important from a budget perspective, but also a brand safety perspective. A lot of the time, you know, there's a lot of spend going through apps, mobile apps, and actually very, very rarely do apps perform for the majority of businesses. There are obviously certain scenarios. If you're promoting an app, then, you know, app placements are going to work relatively well. But generally for kind of sales, I'm sure we've all been there. We've been on an app, all of a sudden an app's popped up, and before you can even do anything, you've clicked on it. And for you as an advertiser, that generates the cost per click. So you've paid for that click, but the user didn't even mean to click in the first place. The other one is around placements for kind of children and kids TV and things like that. That comes out a lot, particularly even when you've got kind of your audiences and your targetings narrowed down. What Google doesn't always account for is the fact that as a parent, you're very often, it might be at certain times that it's your child that has your phone, and they're watching YouTube or something on the phone. And so actually the ad is being delivered, and it's being delivered, you know, on content such as like Peppa Pig and Paw Patrol and things like that. And actually you're not reaching the audience you thought you were reaching. So using the content suitability settings to put guardrails up against those kind of placements always helps. Looking at your scheduling. So look at your time of day reports. Now, Smart bidding should factor this in, but it's not always the case. And sometimes you just know your business better than Google ever can. You know, if you look at your data over time, is there certain pockets of time where you're spending a lot, but you're not getting anything back at that point? This is where you could look to potentially make efficiencies in your budget. If you do make any changes to kind of your scheduling, just be sure to kind of check back on what the impact has been. Because sometimes what you can find is you might take a scheduling slot out. So you might say, okay, well, between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m., I never get any conversions. So I'll take that time slot out. But actually, it might be that during that time slot, that's when people are doing their research, and same for kind of weekends and stuff. So just making sure you're monitoring the impacts of any changes. Looking at budget allocation and pacing, landing page quality and conversion rates is kind of a big one. It's one where you have a lot of control over. With all kind of the automations and AI coming into the ad accounts, your landing pages and what's happening on your website, that it's always played a big role in terms of obviously your conversion rates, but it's even more crucial that you get kind of that element right. So, you know, running landing page tests can help to identify and improve kind of those conversion rates. Looking at devices, and then also looking at, you know, your campaign type versus your KPIs. If you're looking to drive sales, you know, YouTube might not necessarily achieve that for you. So how is your budget allocation set against, you know, what the campaign type is? Is it optimizing for awareness? Is it optimizing for sales? And what is your budget distribution for those? On the campaign level, we're looking at things like product keywords, and then spend versus performance. So kind of that wasted spend reports that we've just looked at. The search term reports that we've spoken around. There's also things like cannibalization. So you can have it at keyword level, you can have it at product level. When you have it, and it essentially means that more than one product or more than one keyword is triggering for a user search. And without kind of exclusions and guardrails, it just means that Google decides which of those products or which of those keywords delivers. But it might be that actually, if you use exclusions, you can say to Google, well, actually, this is the product that should be shown when a user searches this term, or this is the keyword that should trigger. And the importance of that is comes essentially down to, you know, from a keyword perspective, that changes what ad messaging and it changes what potential landing page a user is going to end up on. So that's really important to kind of understand how the account is cannibalizing itself. And that gives you an opportunity to make efficiencies to things like their click-through rates and ultimately the conversion rates then as well. From the search term report and all of that, making sure there's clear negative keyword coverage. The amount of accounts we audit and there's not a single negative keyword within the account would probably be quite shocking to a lot of you, but it does happen. So just make sure that you've got your negative keywords there. What I've already touched on around kind of the bid strategy alignments, just making sure that they do align to what your objectives are, what your targets are, and then looking at the asset performance. So we'll go on to kind of creative shortly as well. When it comes to kind of prioritizing spend, obviously at the conversion level, this is where people are searching exactly. It might be retargeting audiences, it might be branded search. This is the highest intent, it's the highest return. So you should try and protect this budget as much as possible. At the consideration stage, for most brands, this is where the budget, the largest share of the budget will sit. This is where people they're not necessarily searching for you, but they're searching for the solution that you are providing. So this is within, you know, generic search, it's within shopping. It can also be within kind of social on kind of intent based audiences and stuff as well. And this is where the largest share of kind of the budget typically sits. The bit that usually, excuse me, the bit that usually gets cut the quickest is the element around awareness. Now, When it comes to awareness, actually, this is all about building for the long term. So if you start to cut budget here now, you're gonna feel it down the road. If the budget is super tight, obviously you may not have an option around reducing budget in kind of this area. But think of kind of the elements on the previous slide. What can you do to make the budget that you do have in this area more efficient? So looking at the placements, where is it appearing? Who is it appearing for? And adjusting kind of those metrics to make the spend that you do have go that little bit further. So we have our next poll. And for this one, we're looking at how often do you currently refresh your creative? So first, I can't remember when we last refreshed. So this is, have you not refreshed in the last 12 months? Have you just put some creative in and left it there? Are you refreshing every couple of months? Are you refreshing at least monthly or at least weekly? We'll see what comes in on this one. Okay, looks like everybody, or most people at the moment, are coming at every couple of months. We've got 83% on there at the moment, but we'll give everyone a couple more moments just to fill this in. Okay, we've got a few more responses coming in. Okay, so we have got 20%, just changed at the last minute there. 20% can't remember when they last refreshed. 47% are refreshing every couple of months. Just changed again, but 31% are refreshing at least monthly, and we've got nobody refreshing at least weekly. So we'll go into kind of creative just shortly. There's just a couple of questions I've just seen in the chat, which I will just address while we go through because they're related to the previous bit. Can I do analysis on Claude for free, or do I need a subscription? You can do it for free. The only restriction that you may find is you can run out of chat requests quite quickly, depending on kind of the scale of the data. But yeah, you could certainly get a report or two out quite easily within the free model. I very often, on my personal account, I'll do it in the free model and I'll get the data out just the same. So yeah, you can absolutely do it within the free one. Can we also give AI Amazon ads details? Could AI help there? Yes, you could definitely give it kind of the same information. So if you're exporting like the search terms, keywords out of Amazon ads or kind of your organic side of things, and same for kind of your product performance. I know Amazon can be, particularly if you've not got a tool to kind of run the management, can be a bit of a minefield trying to get kind of data out of Amazon. So yeah, you could absolutely apply the same principles to that as well. What is the split of campaign type for paid search for your clients? Mainly optimizing for awareness or sales? We are not an e-commerce company. Majority, I'll probably say around 80% campaign type optimizing towards sales, 20% towards kind of awareness. This does sway somewhat when you introduce the likes of Performance Max campaigns, because Performance Max by their nature optimize for kind of the full funnel. So that in itself, then you essentially hand the control over to Google to decide where is going to be kind of best place to spend kind of the budget. From a lead gen perspective, particularly within Google Ads, it depends if it's lead gen for consumer or lead gen for business. Google, when it comes to lead gen for business, there are, I would say, fewer controls to get to the right audience on the awareness side. It takes a little bit more kind of sculpting and crafting to kind of build a good targeting structure. It's absolutely doable, but it just takes a little bit more sculpting to get that kind of control. Okay. So the next element is looking at creative importance. So how we go from branding when it comes to the creative and translating this into performance, and why the creative it's becoming key to your success within kind of majority of ad platforms. So when it comes to creative, if you don't have the right creative for whatever reason, it can, be a detriment and constrain the platform's ability to perform and deliver the results that you need. And when we're talking about creative, there's a couple of elements. So looking firstly at the variety. So if we've got creative, but we're only giving the platform, whether it's Google or whether it's Meta, one version of that creative. So we're saying, here you are, Google, here's a video. It's not going to have anything to test. And Google and Meta's algorithms work best when they've got variations to test with, because they use those to determine, what works best for each and every auction, rather than serving the same ad for every auction. It's picking and choosing, well, actually for this audience, on this device, we think this ad is going to work best. So without providing variants of the creative, it quickly runs into the next one, which is fatigue, and also just a lack of testing capability. When it comes to creative, fatigue is accelerating, and there's two sides to this. Part of this is, I would say, being pushed by the use of AI to generate creative volume. Audiences are tiring a lot quicker. Ideally, the suggestion is to have new refreshed creative every 4 to 6 weeks. And this doesn't have to be a complete overhaul. Learn from what is working currently and build on that. But with kind of the AI generation, just making sure that it reflects kind of your brand, that it's clear, that if you're doing kind of e-commerce, that it accurately represents the products that you're trying to sell, because users will become fatigued, and because there's so much I suppose creative churn out there now, that anybody essentially can produce some level of creative, albeit the standards can vary quite considerably. But just making sure that where you are producing creative, that it ties into this last one of quality will always beat quantity. So whilst variation is good, one clear message will outperform 10 low quality ads every single time. Because if the ad doesn't, identify its purpose, it doesn't offer solution, and it doesn't talk to the audience that is going to see the ad, then it's not going to hit, and it's not going to kind of resonate. If it's just, generic churn and the creation of a creative for creative sakes just to get variety in there, then it's not always going to be of benefit. So focus on quality. AI can certainly, it can certainly help, but I would say, for a lot of the creative, it does need a little bit of a human touch, or even kind of with the AI, still kind of that specialist creative background to really produce something that isn't just kind of AI churn. When we are leveraging AI for creative, we can utilize AI, coming up with ad copy variants. So when we're writing ad copy, sometimes you're sitting there, particularly if you're in kind of like a niche, and within Google Ads, where you've got like the 30 character headline limit, you can be pulling your hair out trying to think of different variations and what you can say. So AI can help. You just need to give it kind of the context and what you're looking for and the parameters. So things like the character count limits. AI can certainly help with that. Give it a human touch after, don't just take what the AI spits out without kind of proofing it. It can also help with product title and description rewrites at scale. My colleague James, he built a tool actually that kind of utilizes AI and merges a lot of different data kind of to do this. But you can do this, within Claude, within ChatGPT, with an Excel file as well, on a smaller scale, and give it kind of the prompt, give it, what you're looking for in terms of kind of structure for the titles, any kind of supporting information and things like that. And then it will kick back the updated product titles, and again, just give them kind of a human glance, just to make sure that they make sense and it's not hallucinated anything. Analyzing the creative data, so a bit like what I showed with the product spend efficiency data, doing the same with creative data, finding out, which creative, which messaging, pivoting that data to see what performs best. Once you have a creative, AI can be quite useful for asset adaptions. It can also be useful for image generations. I haven't found it to be great at producing a banner from scratch. But then again, I'm not a creative expert, so you might have better luck in that kind of area. But certainly, if you've got a product image, AI has become kind of really good, particularly like Nano Banana. That's become great in terms of putting it into a setting. If you get to, like, let's say Easter this weekend, for example, if you've got a dining set, AI it's become really great at applying a Easter table setting to that dining set. So things like that, it can really help with just repurposing the imagery that you do have to get that bit of creative refresh. And then also really, really good at video scripts. So, well, for me as well, when it comes to like a video script, that doesn't come naturally to me. So having things like AI to kickstart the process, it doesn't have to be the finalized item, but it can just, kickstart that kind of thought process of an ideation of, what could that look like, and help get to kind of a finished article. But when it comes to AI, there's still human input required. So your kind of brand voice, your strategic messaging, just making sure that this is given to the AI. If you're asking it to, produce any ads, produce any creative, your offers, your promotions, if it's time sensitive, anything like that, it's going to need that human input. Always quality check and compliance from a human. AI can, mark its own homework if you like, or you can give, Claude to ChatGPT to get it to mark the other's homework, but always human input, and give it a once over. User generated content style, creative, that's always going to require human input. Anyone is going to know at this point, if you're using AI to generate that, it's not authentic. So if you're going down kind of that route, having kind of a human do that is still by far the best approach. And then, you're always going to have to write the prompt to generate the AI in the first place. So there's room for humans still, definitely. AI is not taking over creative as yet. From a attribution perspective then, in terms of why attribution and measurement has become harder, there's a few kind of elements. So there's what's known as platform inflation. When you look at the data within a platform, it will give credit, it will assign credit to itself. So, and this is a difference between looking at data in like Google Ads and then looking at data in somewhere like Google Analytics, which is an amalgamation of sources. Google Analytics will give credit to the various different channels, whereas Google Ads, if it was involved in the conversion journey, if a user clicked on an ad at any point before they converted, if it's within the conversion window you set, default is 30 days, but it could be 90 days, then Google will assign itself credit. In Google Analytics, that may have been attributed elsewhere. And the same goes for Meta. And that means that within Meta and within Google Ads, for example, that one sale may be reported twice. So when you're looking at platforms as silos, you get this kind of inflation of numbers where you've got more sales than you've had on your website. So when you're looking at platforms in silo, just take kind of that data with a pinch of salt. There's the cross-device journey that kind of factors into that, and that's how we get kind of those inflated numbers. iOS and privacy changes, so changes to kind of Safari, changes to kind of cookie consent, have all impacted on how much data we're actually able to gather. Things like server-side tracking can help kind of get around some of these. So that helps to get around things like ad blockers, because the tracking is deployed from your domain rather than from Google's or Meta's domains. But ultimately, if somebody denies cookies as it stands, we're not able to track that user and whether they visit the site, whether they make a purchase, generate a contact form, anything like that, then you lose the visibility. And it's not really something at the moment you can get around. There's also conversion modeling happening. This can happen across all of the platforms. So it means that the data that you see, whilst Google does say, it won't model the data unless it's got a high level degree of certainty that, a conversion was likely to happen, it does mean that actually the data that you see within an account is not always the truth. Well, it's certainly not the truth. It's most likely got model data in there. Annoyingly, they also don't show how much of the data is modeled, so you don't get a breakdown of what was actually recorded versus what was modeled. Only very, very occasionally have I ever received this from Google. What I would say, though, is when it comes to looking at kind of the bigger picture, blended metrics is going to give you kind of the clearest view of kind of what's happening with your marketing spend. And there's a few metrics that you can kind of look at. So the marketing efficiency ratio. So this is a single view of all paid media spend versus the total revenue. So that's just going to give you essentially a return on ad spend, but across everything. So you take your total revenue from your source of truth, which is usually going to be your kind of website, and you divide that by the total ad spend of all of your advertising accounts. That's going to give you your marketing efficiency ratio. The other one is looking at new customer acquisition. So this is shifting kind of the focus to kind of business growth rather than just, retention, because a lot of what comes through the ads, it's undeniably existing customers or past customers. So this is shifting to kind of new customer acquisition. And then that takes the same sort of thing. So it takes the total spend across your accounts, but then it divides it by, the number of new customers. And that's going to give you the cost it took to acquire a new customer. And you can kind of start to benchmark that data. And then finally, you've got your customer lifetime value versus your customer acquisition cost ratio. So this is looking at what the ceiling of cost needs to be on acquiring a customer. Ideal target of 3 to 1. So if it takes you £20 to acquire a customer, your lifetime value of that customer needs to be at least £60, for example. But obviously you'll need to work that out based on your own kind of margins and costings within your business. So, but they give you kind of a more blended view. Still, you can look at, the individual platforms from a optimization perspective. But when you do, just keep in mind that they they are going to kind of overlap in the data that they show, and they're not a source of truth for kind of your overall performance. But when you're building your kind of measurement framework, reliable tracking is going to be the cornerstone of any paid media work. Any efficiency that you make relies on the fact that you've got accurate and reliable tracking in place. So make sure that you fix your tracking, create that blended view, so you can track, how you're performing business-wise against your spend, using those in-platform data for optimization signals, and then finally you can use incrementality testing for big budget decisions. So where you don't have great kind of attribution, because to use like big tools like Triple Whale that do multi-channel attribution and things like that, but they require tens of thousands of sessions and data every single month in order to kind of utilize them, and they're quite pricey. So outside of that, incrementality testing can kind of help, and that's about identifying and testing something in isolation. So a lot of the time it could be like geographic based. So you might launch a campaign only targeting like Manchester area, for example, and then you will track the performance of that versus the performance of everything else in the holdout location, which is everything else you've not targeted. Did the conversion rate increase? Did your sales increase at a higher rate in Manchester than they did within kind of the rest of the UK, for example? So that's just a way to control test any new ideas, new campaigns, new channels, and really understand what the impact is of those. Final poll we have got. Just make sure I close the one before. Oops. Okay, so the final poll is how much of your current account management is automated. So A, very little. B, you're using smart bidding only. C, you're using smart bidding, plus you're also using some potential rules and automated rules and scripts within the account. And D, significant automation. So this could be you're using AI to do reporting, you're using the MCP to make campaign changes and stuff on your behalf and things like that. Got a very mixed bunch of answers coming in at the moment. Give everyone just a few moments. Okay, so the majority, actually 67% are saying they use it very little. 24% are using smart bidding only, 6% using bidding with some rules and some scripts, and 6% using significant automation. So very mixed bunch, but majority using not very much, or just kind of the standard smart bidding within the tools. So there's definitely a real opportunity for those not using any automation as yet to expand out into it and just get yourself some kind of efficiencies from a time perspective, but then also, the elements we've identified from kind of a budget saving perspective as well. So how we can gain efficiencies with AI and automation, but having guardrails in place. So things that are essentially safe to automate and also useful to automate. So your bidding strategies is kind of the obvious one. Google's got so much data behind them that you just can't match it with your manual bidding. Things like account alerts, so setting up rules to alert for kind of budget pacing. These are really straightforward to set up. You can do it by automated rules if you're not comfortable kind of using scripts. And they're just like built in to the account, so very, very easy to set up. You can use it to create data-backed budget changes. So if you're using it to kind of analyze the data, a bit like we did with kind of the products, that just makes sure that, if you're making budget changes, you're doing it based on kind of data rather than just here, there, and everywhere. using it for product labeling and exclusions. If you're obviously an e-commerce business, you can also use the same principle with the labeling for like keyword performance as well, to identify which are performing, which are not, and labeling and pausing kind of those. Use it for scheduled reporting, data visualization, and competitor ad monitoring. That can save you a lot of time if you can just run a report automated to go away and check what your competitors are doing. But make sure that you keep human oversight. So when it comes to channel strategies, keep human oversight of that. You know where kind of your audience is. You can use AI to get some inspiration, but ultimately you should be making kind of that decision. The audience targeting, I've put an asterisk next to it, because if you're using tools like campaign types like Performance Max or the AI Max and Vantage Plus within Meta or like TikTok, then they do control kind of the audiences, but you do still have some controls in terms of you can put like exclusions in place and things like that. So you still have some control over kind of that strategy. Your creative strategy, keep human oversight. Targets and KPIs, you should definitely be setting these yourself. AI does not know your business like you do with your kind of margins. If you've got all of that data, you can give it to the AI if you feel comfortable and ask it, what should your targets be for the accounts, but make sure you've got human oversight just to kind of quality check that. Campaign launches, and then also interpreting performance changes. AI can analyze this, but you want to keep base with what's actually happening and keep a handle on it. This is just an example of what the script for product bucketing can do. So if you automate this through kind of a script, it'll automatically put labels to say whether you're high performer, low performer. You set your thresholds of kind of what each of those is. And it just means that you can set different bidding targets and budgets depending on how the products are performing. And you can see that, it's very, very different from kind of the low performers and ones that you would exclude versus your top performers. So you definitely want to kind of adjust budget and push budget towards what performs best. When it comes to Performance Max, whether it's friend or foe, Performance Max works well when you've got a strong product feed, if you've got sufficient conversion volume. So it works best when you've got a lot of data behind it. It will work best if you've got high quality assets. So this is both the creative assets, strong landing pages and product pages, as well as a strong product feed. You need effective conversion measurement. If you've not got that, it's running off false data. So you're going to get, if you're already getting low quality, you're just going to get more low quality stuff through. When it's properly structured, when you've got clear high value audience signals, so when you've got first party data that you can give to the campaign to say, this is who I want more of, go find more of these people, then that's going to work best. When to be cautious around kind of brand search, it can hide, again, a lot of averages. So overall, the campaign might look like it's performing well, but actually it might just be targeting a load of brand search, then it's going to perform well. If it targets predominantly existing customers, again, it's going to look good on the outside, but actually you're just bringing back customers that already were going to come to you anyway. If you've got low quality or you haven't got any creative assets, then you're not going to get the most out of Performance Max. If you don't retain product control or exclusions, so using things like the performance bucketing labels, and if you've got a poor measurement setup, it's going to give you more poor quality conversions out the back, like I mentioned. With the AI bidding strategies, typically, if you're an e-commerce business, target return on ad spend is going to be the best option. Just be cautious that if you target is set too high, it will throttle the campaign because Google essentially can't achieve it. If the target's too low, then this is where wasted spend creeps in. The same applies for target CPA. So if you're on a lead based campaign, if you've got consistent cost per acquisition, then this is going to kind of work best for you. But again, if your target's too high, it's going to limit. And if your target's too low, you're going to have wasted spend. Conversion value bidding, if you've not got a ROAS target to mind, just be cautious that it means that there's no bid limit. So you have to really monitor your cost per clicks and your budget closely. And maximize clicks, if you're running like upper funnel awareness campaigns, can work well to get you traffic, but just be cautious that Google is focused on getting you traffic. It's not necessarily focused on getting you high quality traffic. And then as well, if you've got a low data account outside of Performance Max, you can use portfolio bid strategies, and these allow you to share data between campaigns and also set bid caps, which you can't do when just using a standard campaign bid strategy. Oh, got to the end. So thank you for listening. I think there was a few questions outstanding, which...
Yeah, thanks for that, Holly. There was a few questions. I think you answered them all up until the one from MLE, which was Google Ads keeps targeting tagging campaigns as eligible, limited, not targeting relevant searches, but then the keyword recommendations are not relevant. Is this something to be worried about?
It's not necessarily something to be worried about. It can mean, so if it's eligible, limited, and it's suggesting like keyword expansion, it can just mean that you'll have limited ad delivery. So it might be that, and I don't know obviously the context, but you might be operating in a niche, in which case you might not expect high search volumes. Very often in these cases, the keywords that Google suggests they're not relevant. And this is where kind of that human oversight is really, really important and valuable, because if you just did everything Google's AI told you to do, it doesn't have the context that you have about your business. But yeah, the main thing would be usually it just means that you'll have lower ad delivery, which is normally as a result of low search volume.
Cool. And then there was another one. What is generally the lowest budget spend to make the switch to Performance Max worthwhile for niche products? Is it worth it?
It really, really depends on the size of your feed, what category you're in. You know, some businesses could operate on a £30 per day Performance Max budget. Others, you know, if you had less than £200, your budget would be kind of limited, and that would limit the optimization and performance of the campaign. So it really comes down to kind of the specific industry. For niche products, proceed with caution would be my advice, because similar to the query actually just before, what Google will do with Performance Max is establish how and who to target, and it can mean that it opens up kind of your product targeting into a broader audience and broader product searches than kind of the niche that potentially you're in. You can add negatives to kind of counter this, but yeah, if you did go out into it, just proceed with caution.
And then you kind of answered it in the question before, but then there was just one that said as well, how do we know how much daily spend should be for how many locations? Is there a rule of thumb? But I guess it depends, like you said before, on the demand and the costs for clicks and things.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no one size fits all. When you do if you're doing like your campaign planning, Google will give you like an idea of like what your cost per clicks are going to be, and then you can also look at that from like your existing conversion rate perspective and do some calculations backwards of, okay, I need to achieve like this. If I want to achieve this, this is how much I need to kind of put in. But yeah, a lot of it's going to come down to, you know, what the search volumes are like. For example, if you're going to target London, that's a much bigger and broader area with much higher population density than if you were going to target like Leicester, where we are. So it just depends. There's a lot of factors to consider on that one.
Cool. And then what ones are there? Do you have any recommendations for competitor ad monitoring AI?
None that are particularly great. So Anne, our ND, she's essentially, or we've built our kind of own one to run this. Yeah, because nothing necessarily does it effectively, and it depends what it is that specifically like you're looking for. If it's the ad copy itself, then this can be scraped from the ads transparency tool or Facebook's meta library by kind of the AI. That can get scraped. If it was things like, a lot of the time what comes up is, how much are my competitors spending? Tools like SEMrush, tools like SimilarWeb, they offer this, but it's never even come close to what is actually being spent. So if we've compared it to like our accounts and what is actually being spent, it's not even anywhere near. So those kind of things are not very reliable.
Yeah, we have the same problem with SEO, like organic traffic. Tools like SEMrush or Ahrefs, they're often quite a way out because it's obviously third-party data and it's all based on formulas and estimates, I guess. So, and then I know we're a little bit over, so I'll just see if there's any others. If a paid campaign is still performing well after a couple of months with strong link clicks and engagement, is there still a need to refresh or update it, or would you just leave it running?
I would say there's still a valid reason to like update it, not necessarily to overwrite it. So typically when we launch a test, it will launch in parallel with what's already running. So if you put a new creative in, you put it in against what's already there, and then the algorithm will take over to decide, is it performing better? It's that age-old thing of, just because it's performing what maybe we determine right now is good, can it do better? And that's kind of the whole, I suppose, principle of like testing. It probably means like for you, maybe it's not as urgent. So if you're tight on budget, you're tight on time. But yeah, definitely I would say there's still merit in adding in new tests.
Cool, thank you, Holly. There's just one more. I'm not sure whether we'll actually be able to answer it, but I have 165, I'm guessing that's clicks, but only 3 sales. How to fix this? But I imagine there's so many variables that
there's a lot of variables. I mean, it depends what industry you're in. That actually could be like quite an average conversion rate. It depends on what the cost per clicks are. That's not very many clicks at all. The average like conversion rate for a lot of industries can be like 2%. So you're actually sitting above that. Really, you would need like more data to say like what's working or what's not working. Things like, if you did have that data to look at, are, like I mentioned through kind of the presentation, things like your checkout process, your product pages, looking at your product feed. So if it's clicks that you're lacking because you've got a really low like click-through rate or really low impressions, then it might be that actually it's your feed that's the problem. So things like that would be where I would start. So do you have keywords within kind of your title? Do you have like the brand? Do you have like the product type, the solution within your product titles and things like that? And are you using shopping campaigns?
Cool, thanks, Holly. Insightful as ever. Just a couple of things before we go. Obviously, it would be great if we could get just some reviews for Holly just on that webinar.
Oh, thank you. I've just seen, Brad, I think there's one in the Q&A.
Oh, is there?
As well. If people are not aware of you, they will not convert. What do you think can be done here? It's not necessarily true. People will still convert if they haven't heard of you. It's about having like the other trust signals in place. So things like your social profiles can really help. Obviously, reviews, product reviews business reviews, that can all help. It's all about kind of trust signals and proof that, you know, you are who you say you are. Having things, you know, it could be having, you know, payment methods like Apple Pay and things like that, where potentially, you know, users feel a little bit more protected and secure. That can help. But I wouldn't agree that just because people are not aware of you, they won't convert. We've worked with plenty of brands that are not, you know, national household names that do convert. It's just about, you know, reassuring the customer. That being said, you know, they might cautiously convert the first time, and then if they have a really good experience, increase their average order value for the next visit. Obviously, the higher the value of the product, the more reassurance the user is going to need. So it depends, again, what industry you're in as well.
Cool, thank you. And then, yeah, as I said, any reviews would be greatly appreciated. And then the only other thing from me was for anyone that is interested, let me just pop this up on screen. From next week, Anne and Darren will be running a Thursday AI Club. And it's essentially a fortnightly drop-in session for anyone in marketing that's using or wants to use AI. The sessions will always start off with the sort of like an ask me anything, and then there'll be a theme to whatever the lesson is for that week. It will be a paid for session once it properly kicks off, but we're offering on Thursday the 9th a free taster session. So if anyone's interested in that, feel free to just click the link in the pop-up and you'll be able to sign up to that. I'll also pop a link in the chat as well, just for everybody in case they closed it down too quickly. But yeah, hope everyone found today's session useful. Thanks a lot, Holly, for your insights.
Thank you, Brad, for hosting.
I hope everyone has a great bank holiday weekend.
Bro, thanks for joining, everyone.